Hi, I'm Tracey. I'm here today to talk to you about ADHD and try and get you to maybe reframe it and start thinking about ADHD and what it is in a more positive way. So usually the reason we take our child to get an assessment is because something's not as it should be. There are differences, and they're normally negative differences, whether it's behaviour, social interaction, learning at school. There's normally issues cropping up. So we take them to a specialist and go through everything and get a diagnosis. When this happens, it's normally a shock, even if we know that there are these fundamental differences and something's not quite right. And I know in my case, the paediatrician said, "Oh, well, you'll just have to be a better parent." What on earth does he mean? After years, I now know what he means. And I think perhaps a better way of phrasing it is actually to say a better informed parent. So start off by taking a deep breath. ADHD, yes, it has some issues attached. It is going to be difficult. But ADHD is not a curse or something that is a outright negative. ADHD is a difference. The difference starts in the brain, in the chemistry, in very specific areas. So it's these differences that then impact and affect what we are seeing in our children. So as parents, we can make a huge difference to how this plays out. So this is a long-term game plan, basically. Things will be tricky. They will be more work than if we had neurotypical normal child. So if you're on the start of your ADHD journey, you have to realize that it is different for everybody. So keeping in mind that you are unique in the terms of your family dynamics, your personality, your children's personality, that all has an effect on what is going to work for you. But first, again, you need to make sure that you are very clear on what's happening, what you're experiencing, and the part that the ADHD plays in that. So it's about, instead of perhaps focusing on the negatives of the ADHD, thinking that, okay, this is something that we have to deal with. It's here, it's going to impact, but we can make this turn out better. We're looking at the long-term plan. So it may be really difficult, particularly in those early years, the primary and intermediate school age, just because of those fundamental differences in their brain and their brain chemistry. So it's important to keep that in mind. So this means that how we deal with situations, some of the day-to-day trials, tribulations and struggles that we have, they're not going to be easy, but they're not going to be forever either. We really need to make sure that we step in, that we learn as much as we can about ADHD and what it is. So this way we can start looking at what we're seeing our children doing, looking at some of those struggles that they have, and actually be able to step in, put strategies in place, give them support, and work on the really important fundamentals. I'd start with, if you find it tricky perhaps to read a full book, I found that actually looking through articles was great because they were short, they were concise. You could actually search the specific area of difficulty that you're having. There are links on the ADHD Association website. There are also experts that I loved to use and read because I found them positive. For example, Dr. Russell Barclay, Dr. Ned Halliwell, and Dr. Ross Green. So get the information from the best sources. That allows you to then take a step back. You can look at what's happening, some of these issues you're dealing with, and it allows you to recognise this isn't your child being difficult or making your life harder. They are struggling. They have these complications and differences, which means things are not easy for them, and then that flows on to not being easy for you. So as mentioned, we need to be focusing on that long-term goal and the end game. So once we've learned a little bit more about the ADHD, the characteristics and what that looks like, we need to be looking at our children and putting strategies in place and working to their strengths. So we need to be looking for those little things that they're good at, for some of those characteristics that may have a negative impact in some situations, like at school, whereas in life or out in the world, they're actually qualities that we love to be around, that are actually looked for in certain jobs and industries. So where they might be not wanting to obey the rules and do things their own way, perhaps they actually do have a better way to do it. They think outside the square. They are thinking of life in a different way. They're picking up on different cues and seeing different things. So sitting back and looking at their interests. What do they like doing? What are some of their favourite games, toys? Some children are very into computers. Not all ADHD kids are. Some might be interested in the outdoors. So looking at ways that you can get them out there, ways that you can use those interests to help with learning, with providing rewards and allow positive interaction. So the more you're encouraging them and focusing on those things that they're good at, and less about worrying constantly about what they find difficult, the more your relationship with them is going to improve, and how they feel about themselves is also going to improve. Because as much as we as parents worry about how things are going to be, how are they going to be when they're adults, oh my goodness, they might end up in jail at the way they're going, that is us putting our expectations and views on what's going on. There is a long time for them to develop and to grow. Those early years when those developmental delays and those executive functioning deficits are so impactful, and when their skills and understanding of what's going on and inability to cope, when those things are causing ructions and issues at school and so on, they're not going to be going on forever. There are things that we can actually do and put into place. We need to give them the tools so that they learn how to cope and deal with these things. So if we start focusing on those positives, on those things that they enjoy, it's just going to improve those relationships even more so. So in terms of techniques that we can use, again, the positivity is so important, that talking to them, getting to know them, like really getting to know them. So rather than just talking and instructing all the time, we need to listen so that they feel valued and important. So Albert Einstein had a quote that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not achieving a different result. And that is something that we need to take on board as parents. we try these techniques, we try to change our children to make them fit. And surprise, surprise, it's not working. That's because that is not the right way to do it. So when a child feels that they are valued, that again, you're actually focusing on some of those positive qualities rather than just on the negatives, when you're just pulling them up for misbehaviors or when they haven't dealt with situations, it leads into a very negative cycle for us as well as them. So that's why we need to step back and go through logically, keep that emotion aside. So I found it was really good to have a plan. So our kids don't react or act out of the blue. There is normally a reason why. They've found a situation difficult. So things like when we take them out socially, we can actually provide safety nets for them. We can give them instruction on what's expected. So with ADHD, our kids don't pick up the normal social cues. They don't pick up how what they're doing and saying impacts on how other people see them. So we can actually step through, okay, we're going to be going out today. So we're going to John's place and these people will be here. This is what's going to happen. So we'll get there, we'll sit down, you're going to do this activity. Someone might say, hi, how are you? And then actually feed them what they should be doing. So when they say hello, you say hi back. You can go and play or etc. If you start feeling uncomfortable, you need to come to me straight away, and then we could go or have something pre-planned. Like if they need a break, perhaps they could go and sit in the car and have a device. So actually giving them outs. There are always situations and places you know that they're going to struggle. So it's about pre-planning how you're going to deal with these things. This in turn kind of gives them a bit of stability, and when they actually feel like they're in a little bit more control of what's going on and they know what's expected and what's going to be happening, then they can feel a little bit more comfortable. So again, if you're focusing on some of their positives and activities and things that they enjoy, as I mentioned, incorporate those if you can. So if you're working on perhaps getting more friendships and you know that they really love nature and being outside, go to a park, go to Butterfly Creek, go somewhere that they are in an environment that they feel comfortable with. Again, it's talking to them as well about what's going on. Personally, I think it's a great idea to let your child know that they do have this thing called ADHD. Again, there are some tips and preset quotes on how you can actually tell your child that's age appropriate, because they are having these feelings, they are dealing with these things, and if they know that there is a reason behind it and that it is okay, then they can feel better about themselves too. Because one thing we want to make sure is that they don't feel like they're in trouble all the time, that they're getting things wrong, that they're not achieving, and it's their fault, because it's not. It is these differences. It is the ADHD. It's the way their brain is working. So for them, if we can remove that as well and let them know, then they are going to feel better about themselves. And when that happens, again, you know, your relationship with them, it improves. So there are a lot of things that you can do, a lot of tips and techniques and ways to deal with them, ways to communicate, that will, again, lead to that more positive outcome at the end. And I say positive a lot because positivity is going to make a huge difference. So smile. Remember to talk to them. Remember, everybody makes mistakes. Tomorrow is another day. You know, we can work on this. You can't do it yet. A lot of these positive little phrases, let them know that you're there. You will always be there. You will always love them. And you're in it together. And yeah, they're amazing little children, and you're going to have some fantastic stories for their 21st one day, because they do say the darndest things. They do some very unusual things. I've had friends that have had children that have pulled toilets apart and then kind of put it back together. So, I mean, they're amazing. And so we need to be looking at all of these awesome things about them, rather than, again, just looking at the negatives and some of the struggles they're having. So, long-term goal, hard at the time, but you can do it. You just need to reframe, rethink, and love your kids, and you will have an amazing outcome. Keep going. It's a long road. There's going to be lots of ups and downs, but that's just part of life. And we need to recognise that it's not just us, it's not just parents with kids with differences and quirks that have struggles. Every family does. We get so caught up in what we're dealing with that we forget that other people have problems too. You know, it's not just our families. So as deep breath, refocus, and just concentrate on you and your family and what you can do. Never underestimate that.